Thank you for your time today, and this will be my affirmative rebuttal debate. The debate between my opponent and I is that I believe the U.S. federal government should mine water on the moon to prepare for a permanent lunar colony for humans to live, while my opponent believes that there are other ways of solving the water crisis on Earth. My opponent stated in his argument, quote, sending water mapping rovers to the moon and back to Earth with water would be very expensive, end quote. And like I have stated since the beginning of my debate, we would not be bringing the rovers back. The rovers would be staying on the moon to store water for when the time comes to colonize the moon. So, as you can see, my opponent does not have a complete understanding of my argument, and that's why I'm winning for this point. My opponent also mentioned that in my harms, I stated that 780 million people lack access to an improved water source, approximately 1 in 9 people on Earth. My opponent also stated that I did not list any sources for this data, when in fact I did. I stated that this data came from water.org in the article titled Millions Lack Safe Water. So my point is still valid in saying that millions of people are lacking fresh water. I am also still winning for this argument as well because my opponent admitted that people do lack access to water. He claimed that the problem is that it is very difficult to get fresh water to the places that lack it. And that's why my plan of storing water on the moon that was mined on the moon would still be very helpful in solving the water crisis when we could leave Earth to colonize the moon. For my solvency, I stated that colonizing the moon would help provide the water needed for people to survive. My opponent stated that the process of living on the moon would be too expensive and we would not be able to afford a project like this. I have to disagree with my opponent. Because according to Dr. Nova, who wrote an article titled, Should We Colonize the Moon and How Much Would It Cost? In the magazine Pacific Standards, The Science of Society, he stated that Russia is planning to colonize the moon by 2030. He also stated that the cost of colonizing other worlds would be extremely expensive and thus would take an incredible amount of a single country's overall budget. Therefore, human exploration and colonization of the other worlds will likely become an international effort with the cost spread across several countries rather than a space race to beat others to the lunar surface. What this is saying is that colonizing the moon would become an international effort. So I'm also winning in this argument because it is not too expensive if the cost was spread out to different countries besides the US. We could all work together to help solve the problem with the water crisis on Earth. My opponent's final argument was that instead of mining the moon for water, we could just use the process called desalination. I would have to disagree, and this would not be a good alternative to mining the moon, because it would not be a successful process in solving the water crisis that is on Earth. Because according to Michael Schreiber from LivingScience.com, who wrote an article titled Why Desalination Doesn't Work, in the article, Schreiber states that seawater contains roughly 130 grams of salt per gallon. Desalination can reduce salt levels to below 2 grams per gallon, which is the limit for safe human consumption. Also, he stated that between 10 and 13 billion gallons of water are desalinated worldwide per day, which is only about 0.2% of global water consumption. So you can see that this process of desalination is not practical, is not very successful like mining the moon would be, because we know that there is a lot of water on the moon. Schreiber also says that large amounts of energy are needed to generate the high pressure that forces the water to filter. So current methods of desalination require about 14 kilowatt hours of energy to produce 1,000 gallons of desalinated seawater. A typical American uses 80 to 100 gallons of water a day, according to the U.S. Geological Survey. The entire country consumes about 323 billion gallons per day of surface water and another 84.5 billion gallons of groundwater. If half of this water came from desalination, the United States would need more than 100 extra electric power plants, each with a gigawatt of capacity. So depending on local energy prices, 1,000 of gallon of desalinated water or seawater can cost around $3 to $4 just for one gallon. Although that might not seem like much, it is still cheaper in many places just to pump water out of the ground, or in my solution, go mine the water on the moon. But the prices would undoubtedly narrow, especially in regions that could experience more intense droughts. To climate change, water use has been growing twice as fast as the population grows, so causing more and more communities to suffer from water shortages. The demand for fresh water supply will drive prices higher, making desalination increasingly more expensive. As you can see, there's a major inconsistency with my opponent's argument, where he stated that mining the moon would be too expensive, and then he goes to say that we should use desalination instead, which in the long run could cost more than mining the moon. So this is why why his argument is not valid, and my argument is winning for that point. As you can see, my opponent does not seem to have a lot of research or understanding of my arguments or his own arguments, and this is why I believe I'm winning the debate. Thank you.